I am live, which I haven't done before on YouTube, but I figured I'd go ahead and do a video because people have asked me to do one about whether or not Idaho is planning to steal your water through water adjudication. Now, this is a strange question. Like, why would I have to ask such a strange question? Because 2 weeks ago, a video got widely circulated and I received at least a dozen emails, text messages, and other kinds of messaging asking if it was true that Idaho was planning to steal our water. People were concerned because of the content of that video. And then this week, I watched one of the Republicans running for governor put out another video about the same topic in which he suggested that, yeah, there may be some truth to it. So here are the facts about what is going on right now in the Priest Lake area in North Idaho related to water adjudication. So let's talk about water rights and what the Idaho Constitution says first. Okay, so the Idaho Constitution has a whole article about water rights. It's basically Article 15. There are about 6 sections in it. And then there's a whole lot of statutes. These are laws that the Idaho legislature has passed over the years. Now, we have to remember that Idaho became a state in 1890. It's a western state. It's got a lot of water, but still there's a lot of uses for water in this state. So water is a shared resource. So this is the first principle. So in the Idaho Constitution, the water is a shared resource. You have a right to it in the Idaho Constitution, so it would be almost impossible to take away your right, because to change the Constitution, you would have to basically have the legislature pass a bill, and then the voters would have to vote for that in order to change the Idaho Constitution. Now, here's what I mean by you have a right to it. So the waters of the state of Idaho are considered to be public. So when people first start out and say, hey, Idaho's planning to steal our water, well, here's the first thing to know. Idaho statute says that the waters of Idaho belong to the state, not to you. That's like principle number 1. That's not a new statute either, and this is allowed by the Constitution of the state of Idaho. Idaho became a state in 1890, and way back then, the reason it was a state resource is because it is something that is limited and it has to be shared by everybody living in Idaho. We all need water to live. Our agriculture needs water. Our industrial uses need water. Mining needs water. And our animals need water. So basically, it's something that everybody needs. So it can't be like a private property right that if you have a lake or if you have a river coming across your property that you can divert and use the whole thing and deny everybody else the use of that resource. So that's the principle here, and it is not new. Idaho became a state in 1890, and that has been the principle since 1890, codified into law. Nothing is changing about that. Here is what happens. So on my property, I have 2 water sources that I use. Both are considered groundwater. So when water is flowing on top of your property, it's called surface water. When water is under your property, it's called groundwater, no matter how deep it is. So you might be sitting on an aquifer. You might have a creek coming across your property. Just because you own land and water is under or on your property does not mean you have a right to it. Yes, you could appropriate it and begin to use it and develop what's called a water right. But just because it exists, if you're not using it, you don't have an automatic water right. And if you're not using it and don't plan to use it, you should not register your use of it, because that wouldn't be honest. So the whole idea is there's a limited amount of water in the state at any given time. Let's call it an inventory. If we had a glass of water and everybody wanted to stick their straws in the glass of water, we all have to share it, and there's a limited amount. It's being replenished, but it's also being drawn from. So we don't want to just allow everybody to use all of it or claim the use of all of it if they're not actually using it. So here's what the Idaho Constitution says about well, let's go ahead and put some more meat this way. So let's say that you do want to use the water in the stream coming across your property. Well, the Idaho Constitution says that you have a right to appropriate that water, and your right is basically guaranteed. And then when people appropriate waters, in the Constitution, it talks about priority of use. And domestic use, which is for your household and irrigating a half acre around your house, is the highest priority use. And domestic use is defined in the Idaho Code, which is the statutes passed by the legislature. So it's a guaranteed use. It's the highest priority use above agriculture, and that makes sense because you first have to be able to live before you can worry about your crops. But then the crops are kind of a next priority, so agriculture is the next priority. Then we have manufacturing, industrial uses, and those have a priority. And we also have mining uses. And there are actually 75 uses that have been defined by the Idaho Department of Water Resources. So the other thing the Constitution does, so it's in the Idaho Constitution, is it establishes basically a water resource agency, which is now the Idaho Department of Water Resources. And so they basically are the administrative agency of the state that manages water uses. Okay, so let's say I want to use the water, I drill a well, and I appropriate. So that's how you do it. You drill, you stick a straw down into the glass, and you appropriate a portion of water for your beneficial use. Or let's say I dig a hole in a springy area of my property and put some well tiles in it, and then install a pump and pump water for watering stock and irrigating a couple of acres of land. I am appropriating water for my beneficial use. And here's what the state asks, and they've always asked this across all of time. This has been a good idea. They've asked you to register your use so they know who is appropriating water. And then here's the constitutional principle. The first in time has the first in right. So the first person to begin using water has the highest priority to that water. And that's in the statute and Constitution. So if you have an older right, that's a senior right versus someone else who comes in. So for example, if I were using water for domestic household, and then years later, and I established that use, I appropriated it, put it to my beneficial use, and then even registered it with the state. Now the state knows that I'm using that water. And then if a developer bought the land above me, upstream, let's say, and they've installed a golf course, and they started pumping all the water out of the stream or out of the ground to water their golf course, and it negatively affected the quantity of water that was available to me, well, guess what? Irrigating a golf course is lower priority than domestic use. But also, if they come along 10, 20, 30 years later, I am first in time, so I am first in right. So I have a higher priority use for both domestic and being first in time. And rather than having to sue the developer that built the golf course because I've run out of water, instead, all I have to do is call the Idaho Department of Water Resources, and they will basically go shut that developer down if it can be proven that their use is negatively affecting my use. So this is why it's actually a good thing to have the Department of Water Resources. So that stream that flows across my property flows across a lot of other properties. The water that's under my property goes under a lot of other properties. So we all have to share it. So we have this system that the legislature in Idaho in the 1960s and 1970s put some meat on the bones and said, hey, there's been people using water in Idaho ever since before Idaho became a state. And let's go ahead and create a registration system. And so you can go to the Idaho Department of Water Resources, and you can find when people established water rights, appropriated water, and put it to beneficial use. And that's a good thing because, again, it helps the agency know who's got senior rights based on first in time. It also helps them know, for example, I'll give you another example. My brother irrigates a field, and he has established an appropriation and put to beneficial use because he's got a dairy. But the agency came and helped him decide how much to appropriate. And sure enough, if he appropriates even a little bit more, let's say he waters more, it ends up just kind of running off the property. So the agency was super helpful to establish a water registration for his use that really is all that he needed to irrigate that field and not more and not less. So I just have to tell you that the agency, the Idaho Department of Water Resources, I have some things to say bad about some state agencies, but the Idaho Department of Water Resources is not one of them. So now let's talk about what's going on with water adjudication, because 5,000 people have received notices in the Priest Lake area regarding water rights and water adjudication. And so that's why these videos came out. Hey, the state of Idaho wants to steal your water. Well, remember, the state of Idaho already owns your water, but you have a right to appropriate it and put it to beneficial use. Here's what water adjudication is. It's not new to Idaho. That's a key principle. It is only new to Bonner County. And the reason it's new to Bonner County is because the state is completing an adjudication of the entire state. Let's look at what the word adjudication means. It's got the word Jude in it, which is judiciary. And it is in state court that we're trying to get a judicial decree at a given date and time of all the water uses that are going on in the state of Idaho, so that we essentially have a judicial declaration, a declaration from a court that says these are all the uses of water at this point in time. It's basically an inventory. What's our checking account balance of all the deposits of water going in and all the checks being drafted against water going out? Do we have enough, etc.? So this is a date and time inventory of water uses. That's what's going on in the state of Idaho with water adjudication. Let me tell you how that got started. Well, people have always argued over water rights and water uses, and so they've had to sue their neighbors. And that's adjudication. But what's going on right now is what's called general adjudication, and it started because of a lawsuit between neighbors. Basically, in the 1980s, 1983, there was a lawsuit between Idaho Power and upstream users of the Snake River. Idaho Power has dams. They were generating power. The upstream users, there was some litigation. The Idaho Supreme Court weighed in and basically issued a decision that kind of threw water rights into question. And the legislature decided it had to do with the upstream users and their impact and their rights versus the dam's rights. And so anyway, the legislature in the mid-1980s decided to appropriate money and decided to start general water adjudication, meaning they were going to inventory all of the Snake River water uses. Well, that started in 1987. It actually took 27 years. It finished in 2014, and it cost $94 million that the state of Idaho paid for, and it resulted in a document of 275,000 pages with over 150,000 uses and appropriations of the Snake River water basin. Well, that was basically a decree, a judicial declaration at that date and time of all of the water uses of all of the tributaries, streams, rivers, etc., that flowed into the Snake River and went through all of the state of Idaho. So for the first point in history at that moment, Idaho knew who's using water, how much water they're using, and who has priority use. Up until then, if it's not documented, we don't know. If I have a fight with my neighbor, and I've been using water for 15 years, but no one's ever documented it, and my neighbor has been using it for some time, but nobody documented that, now we got to go fight in court. Well, this judicial decree basically just does this ahead of time. It's a preemptive adjudication. Here's what's going to happen in Bonner County. We're going to find out. Right now, there are only like 2,500 declared water uses in Bonner County, but the Department of Water Resources estimates that there's like 9,000 actual appropriations or more. And so what it's actually going to do is it's going to increase the number of water appropriations. And for the first time, the department's going to know all the people using the water. Well, here's how it benefits us, okay? It's not that they want to come steal your water. They just want to know how much is being used so that they know how much more can be appropriated, and we can head off future disputes between neighbors because we've documented who has priority, who's been using it. Here's another principle. If you stop using the stream or the underground water under your property and you stop using it for more than 5 years, and let's say even if you declared water right for that, let's say the 1950s, someone declared water right on your property to irrigate a field, and that field is no longer being irrigated and hasn't been irrigated for 25 or 50 years, well, that's going to be cleared off the books, which is right to do because the people shouldn't maintain a senior water right if they're not actually using it and haven't used it in decades. That would be unfair to the people that came along later and actually wanted to use inappropriate water in that area. So one of the things that water adjudication does is it clears off old uses, old rights that the department may have already known about, but that are no longer able to be proven to be used or are not being used. And it adds a whole bunch of undocumented users and uses so that we have a record with a state court judicial declaration, multi-thousands of pages that say, here's all the water that's being used, so that we know whether we're overusing the water, do we have a lot more water that we can appropriate for beneficial use? And in all this, the Department of Water Resources has been super helpful, and they're not looking to steal your water. Okay, that is my wrap up. Key principles. First in time is first in right. That's in the Idaho Constitution. It's not going to go away without a constitutional change. Another thing this video said was that the department wanted to start measuring the flow from your well. They wanted to put a flow meter on your well, like that's a rumor. First of all, in state statute and Idaho code, the law passed by the legislature, they're prohibited from doing that for domestic purposes. You can't measure the flow. You can't require the measurement of flow. So in order for that to change, it couldn't be the Department of Water Resources that changes it. And the Department of Water Resources has said they have no desire to measure flow. They don't have the capacity to keep track of that much information. They don't want to know. So domestic use is 13,000 gallons a day, which is a ton. Stock water use, same thing. And so you're allowed to use up to that much. You'll never be asked to meter that water. And in order to require metering of that water, the state legislature, your elected representatives and senator, would actually have to pass a bill into law, and the governor would have to sign it, because right now Idaho code, Idaho law prevents requiring you to measure your domestic well flow. Okay, so principle again, first in time is first in right. Domestic always has higher priority over other uses. Your domestic is not going to be measured. You do, so here's what you have to do during adjudication. When I have 2 water rights on my property that I registered with the department a decade ago or longer. And I paid $100 for each time I declared that right. And then I haven't had to do anything since then except use the water. Well, during adjudication, they do want me to pay $25, go to their website, and basically reaffirm that I'm still using that water so that it can be included in the judicial decree. That's all they're doing. It's not an ongoing $25, it's a one-time $25 fee. And what that's basically going to help do is to pay for adjudication. Remember how I said the Snake River Basin took 27 years and cost $94 million? They were hoping that the federal government was going to pay for that, because the federal government has uses and water rights in the state of Idaho also. And the United States Supreme Court decision basically prohibited the government from paying for that. I didn't read that case and don't know why, but Idaho had to pay for that. So the $25 is just a mitigation fee that will help them get this, pay for the judicial decree. And that's it. It's a one-time $25. So I paid $100 for one of my water rights 10 years ago or longer, and I'm going to have to pay another $25 during water adjudication, which, by the way, has not started where I live. I live off of Dufert Road, but it's going to be coming to me soon. It's only started up in Priest Lake right now, but it's going to hit all of Bonner County. It's going to get all of Bonner County, and eventually Boundary County is going to be done too at some point in the future. And when Boundary County gets done, when Bonner and Boundary County are done, then since 1987, when general adjudication first started, for the first time, the entire state of Idaho will have had general adjudication, will have court documents that declare all the water uses in the entire state at some future point when Boundary County gets done. And we will be the only western state that has ever completed water adjudication. It's actually quite a feat, a logistical nightmare for the court and for the Department of Water Resources, but they've geared up and they've become technical experts at documenting all these uses and taking this inventory at this point in time. I hope I haven't bored you, but that's the bottom line with water. We have a lot of water in North Idaho, but it's still limited resources and we have to share with everybody. Just so you know, 2 years ago in 2019, the Palouse River Basin, they did general adjudication there, and it only took 2 years to do that entire adjudication and document all the water uses on the Palouse River Basin, as compared to the 27 years of the Snake River. Because if you think about the Snake River, it flows like through a really significant portion of the state of Idaho, with literally over 150,000 water appropriations of those waters and tributaries and groundwaters and surface waters. Anyway, that's what's going on with adjudication. I don't fear it. It's actually going to benefit all of us. We'll end up with more recorded uses in North Idaho. And I know people are worried, well, don't register with the state. Well, it's not. You have constitutional rights. This is a God-given right, ultimately, but it's enumerated in the Constitution. And the state, in this sense, is just protecting the collective interests. The state in this case, remember, the power is inherent in the people. We are the state, okay? And we had to have a system whereby that we can resolve disputes between this limited resource that's water. I'm going to let you think about one more thing before I leave. Wild game. We all share the deer in the state of Idaho. We all share the elk. We can't let one guy kill all the elk in the state of Idaho and use it for himself. We can't let one guy kill all the deer up my road and let him use all the deer for himself and deny everybody else the use of deer. So that's why the state of Idaho also declares that it owns the wild game in the state. You don't own the wild game just because they walk across your property. Well, it's the same with water. Wild game is a limited resource. Water is a limited resource. The state is basically the arbiter that helps manage it between all of the demands and interests for that limited resource. That's all that's going on. No big deal. So I'm planning to participate as soon as it comes to my area. Online on the Idaho Department of Water Resources, you can complete online filing right there. I'm going to pay my $25 fee, and yeah, whatever, it's a tax or fee. I'm okay with some of these. Just to let you know what's going on, the state doesn't want to take your land. They can't. There's no mechanism for them to do that through water resources. And they're not going to come and steal your water off your property. That's not going to happen. Okay, if you're using the water, you're going to be allowed, of course, to keep using the water. And you can't claim a water right if you're not actually using water. Just because it runs off your roof onto the ground and flows off your property does not mean you've established a water right. So I hope you understood all that from the video. Thanks, I'm Scott Hernan, running for Idaho State Senate District 1. And I'm not just another politician, but that's trying to, get views from this subject. But this is an important subject that people really care about. And I want to correct any misinformation that I perceive that's been given on the subject. Have a blessed day. This is my first live YouTube video.